Good morning, brothers and sisters, and welcome to Coffee with Me and Jesus. We have been out of the book of Matthew, talking and studying about the life and ministry of Jesus Christ. And today we're going into chapter 26. And chapter 26 is the things that start to unfold before the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. In chapter 26, it begins with the chief priests, the scribes, and the elders of the people. They're all meeting together and they're making this plan on how they're going to kill Jesus. Well, they know they can't carry the plan out at that particular time, that day, because of the Feast of Passover, and they don't want to cause an uproar. Well, Jesus is at Simon the leper's house, and in walks this woman with this little box. And she goes over to Jesus and she begins to pour the oil over him and begins to anoint him. And the disciples know that this oil is expensive oil and they're very upset for what this woman is doing. But Jesus knows the intent of their heart, and he looks at them and he says, "Why are you so upset for this beautiful deed this woman is doing to me, this honorable thing that this woman is doing to me? You will always have the poor, and you're always going to have sufficient to take care of the poor, but you're not going to always have me." And so Jesus, he allows this woman to continue to pour the oils over him, and he tells the disciples, this beautiful act, this act of holiness and reverence that this woman is doing to me is going to be talked for many, 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 many times over, because it's a memorial and a testament of her love for me. And as he's talking to the disciples about this, Judas sneaks out and he goes over to the high priest and he bargains with them and he asks them how much will he receive if he turns Jesus over to them. And they come on an agreement of 30 pieces of silver. Well, the disciples, after the woman finishes with Jesus, they talk to Jesus and they tell him, it's coming now for the first day of the feast of the unleavened bread, and we are not prepared. And Jesus tells him, go into town, there's going to be a man there. Just let him know that the time has come, and he will supply you with whatever you need. So the disciples come back, and Jesus tells them, they all sit down and they're getting ready to eat, and they have their little basin of water, and it's customary to wash their hands before they eat. And Jesus tells us, the 12 disciples, tonight one of you are going to betray me. The disciples are grieved because they're thinking, I would never do that. And they talk amongst themselves. They're asking Jesus, is it I? Is it I? And Jesus says, the one who dips his hand in the basin is the one that is going to betray me. And Judas is dipping his hand in the basin to wash it, and he looks at Jesus and he says, is it I? And Jesus said, so you say. How there isn't an uproar at that table and they don't see Judas at that moment is beyond me, but the story continues on that Jesus, he lifts up the bread and he blesses it, and he tells the disciples, here, he distributes it to all of them, take and eat. This is my body. And they eat, and Jesus hands them the cup, and he said, drink all that's in this cup, because I'm never going to drink this with you till I see you in heaven and see you in the kingdom. And it will be new wine. So the disciples, they all drink, and Jesus, they sing a hymn. After they finish doing the first day of the unleavened bread, after they eat the bread, drink, they sing a hymn, and then they depart. They all depart, and Jesus takes with him John, James, and Peter up to Gethsemane, and he tells them, wait here, and he goes on to pray. And it's said that Jesus prays and he weeps bitterly. And he goes back to the disciples and he checks on them and he says, continue waiting here. And he goes on a little bit further and he falls face downward and he weeps, he weeps, he weeps. And he says, he submits to God's will. Let your will be done, Father. And he comes back the second time, checks on them, and then he goes out and he weeps and he weeps. And he comes back the third time and he finds the disciples asleep and he says, couldn't you have at least waited 1 hour? 1 hour for me to watch over me for 1 hour? And then arrives, he yells at them, wake up. And then he tells them the time has come. And Judas arrives with these priests and the elders. And he goes to Jesus and he kisses him on his cheek. And he says, Hail, Master Jesus, the Son of God. And so that's a cue for the high priest and the soldiers that came with him to that is Jesus. And he lifts up his sword, and one of the others on Jesus' side brings the sword, and boom, he cuts off his ear, and Jesus stops that. And he says, why are we fighting? There does not need to be any fighting here. I've eaten with you. I've come to you in peace. We don't have to fight. I'm going with you. I have to go with you. This is prophesied. I know that I have to leave with you. Don't you know that my Father could have called 12,000 angels? But I know it's prophesied, and I'm going with you. And so he leaves with the high priests and the servants, and his disciples just flee. Everyone's fleeing from him. And prior to that I didn't comment on, was while they were at the table talking amongst themselves, Jesus had told them that one of them was going to, when he was talking about one of them betraying him, he had a conversation with Peter, and Peter had told him, I would die for you. All of them were so intent in this moment in time, this emotion that was going, and Peter said, I'd die for you, Jesus. And Jesus looked at him and he said, Peter, you're going to deny me 3 times, and then you're going to hear the sound of a cock crowing. So back to where Jesus is going with the high priests. Peter is following in the background, but the rest of them flee. And Jesus they take him to the high priest Caiaphas, and they tell Jesus, Caiaphas tells the people, who judges this man? Who's the one? What crime has this man done? And nobody says anything. And then finally one speaks up and he says, I'm able to destroy the temple of God and rebuild it in 3 days. And Caiaphas says, well, what do you have to say about this, Jesus? And Jesus says nothing. And Caiaphas says, tell us, are you the son of God? Are you the Son of God? Are you claiming to be the Son of God? And Jesus replies, next time you see me, I will be sitting at the right hand of power, coming in the clouds. And the high priest tore Jesus' clothes off, called him a liar, spit in his face. They struck Jesus. They hit him. They were hitting Jesus with such intent. And outside of this condemnation, this accusation, and this fighting, Peter was outside of the gates, and the woman asked him, aren't you one of those Galileans? And Peter said, no, I'm not. I'm not one of those. He got upset. He goes, I don't even know what you're talking about. Another woman came and said, this man was with Jesus. And Peter turns and he says, I don't know the man. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know the man. And then at another time, another person comes to Jesus and they say, "You're one of them. I can tell that you're one of them by your speech." And Peter begins to curse and swear. And he says, "I'm not one of them. I don't know this man." He gets irate and angry. And then he hears the cock crow 3 times, and he remembers what Jesus said. And Peter runs off, and he weeps bitterly, because he knows that he has done exactly what Jesus has told him that he would do. And in this story, I want to tell you people about betrayal and how Jesus must have felt. Betrayal means you're abandoned. People are unfaithful to you. They bite the hand that feeds you. They blow the whistle on you. They break their faith, their promise. They deceive you. See, these disciples, they walked with Jesus. They saw the miracles that he did. They knew Jesus, and Jesus knew them. And how, when Jesus hung on the cross, that it says he felt everything that you and I feel. This is a portion in the scriptures where we have to understand, not only did Jesus feel the betrayal of humanity, of humans that we do with one another, but Jesus felt the physical part as well, because these people spit in his face. They spit in his face, they nudged him, they ripped his clothes off. So everything that Jesus felt, you and I at some point in our lives have had to feel this. And that is why Jesus had to put on the cloak of the flesh, because the flesh, the human part of us, is so evil. We can be so evil and unkind to one another. But Jesus took all that at the cross, and these hard things that are coming that we're going to read about are the very things that some of us are going to encounter at some point in our life. And some people say today, "Well, he doesn't know how I feel." Well, you know what? We're reading and we're seeing that Jesus very well knew how we felt and do feel. He had his friends complain because this woman was coming in to anoint him and prepare him for the burial. The very Son of God, the precious one, and they're complaining about money, and they're devising wicked plans to kill him. Yes, Jesus knows what it's like to stand alone. His disciples abandoned him. They left him all alone. No, not one of them was standing by his side with this high priest. He had to face him alone. And while he was getting spit at and pushed around, even Peter fled because of his conscience and the truth that he was really had this evilness in him that Jesus foreknew. So that is in this chapter. Let us keep that in mind, that Jesus knows every single thing that we have suffered here on earth. So those of you that have been abandoned and are weeping and have been even physically hurt, know this, that is all being prepared to be taken on the cross. And when we call out to Jesus, he will come and he will mend that broken heart. He will erase those bad memories. He will heal what man's hand has done to you. And it's impossible to explain this in the natural, but in the spirit realm, it can be done, because many people have testimony after testimony after testimony of the horrible things that have happened in their life, and how Jesus, he took it all away. And so that is the conclusion of chapter 26. And tomorrow we'll go into 27. I'm getting close to my 15-minute mark. But today, I want you to spend time this Sabbath talking to Jesus about all the wrong that has been done to you, because Jesus is an expert on any wrong that has been done, because he has gone through it. He's gone through that valley, and he knows exactly how you feel. So today, have a little talk with Jesus. Tell him all about your stories, and he's going to hear you and heal you. Have a blessed Sabbath. Bye-bye.